Welcome back to Hobby Universe Outdoors. I'm Len. Today I'm going to be doing some spring maintenance and getting some things changed over on this garden tractor, getting ready for spring. It is late March, April 1st is in just a couple days, and I've got cabin fever. I'm completely done with the winter weather. I'm over it. I'm ready for a spring. I'm ready to get some things done in the yard. So in anticipation of that, I'm going to get the tractor ready. I'm going to take the snowblower off, get the mower deck back on, and I'm going to get the blades sharpened and go over some other things, and that's what I want to share with you today. The first thing I want to do is get the snowblower off the front of the tractor. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into a lot of detail about that process here, but if you are interested in seeing that a little bit more in depth, I did make a video for that previously. You can find that in my video list. Mower deck off the tractor. This is going to be the perfect time to get a good look at it and give it a quick inspection. First thing I'm going to look at are going to be the belts. And the way I check those is I just give them a little bit of a bend. I'm looking for any little cracks or anything else that would indicate they're dry rotted. Nothing here. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do the same to the inside of the belt. Bending it again, no cracks. These belts are in good shape, which is what I would actually expect. This mower is less than a year old and it doesn't have that many hours on it, so those are good. Something else I'm going to look at is the sides of the belt and along the edges to make sure there's no uneven wear. These belts, again, look good. The tractor's basically new. Unfortunately, when I was taking that snowblower off the tractor and I was removing the belt, there is some really horrible wear around the edges of the belt. I don't know what's going on. Something's either bent or out of alignment. That's frustrating. That snowblower, I'm not going to lie, it is testing my patience. I'm not going to monkey with that now. I'll save that maybe over the summer. I'll see if I can figure out what's going on. For now, the belts on this mower deck look like they're in good shape. Something else I'm going to do is I'm going to look under all these covers. So I'm going to give a quick visual inspection of the pulleys. Those look good. I don't have any weird debris or anything like that under there. Do the same thing on this side. Again, the pulley looks good. No debris. And I'm looking for things like maybe leaves that built up last fall that I didn't get cleaned out for whatever reason. And I'm also looking for maybe a mouse nest or maybe a chipmunk got in here and decided to hide all his little acorns under here or build a nest or something like that. Certainly don't want that. And we're good. So this thing is clean, ready to go. Now I'm going to flip it over and that way we can look at the blades. Now that I've got the mower deck flipped over, first thing I notice is that I've just got a lot of loose debris under here. I got to get this stuff cleaned out. I probably should have did that in the fall before I brought the mower deck in and parked it. Not a big deal. Won't take me that long. It's loose. It's coming off with just my fingers. I'm also going to remove the mower blades and sharpen them up a little bit. Now normally I would take the blades off and I would either hit them with an angle grinder myself, or sometimes I just take them to the local hardware store. It's less than a mile up the road. For these, they're not that bad, so I'm just going to remove them. I'm just going to touch them up a little bit with a file. So I'm going to use the old method, the way I've always done it in the past, and that is to use a chunk of wood to trap the blade between part of the deck, and then use a breaker bar. And actually, that wasn't bad at all. A lot of times, these blades can be really difficult to get off. That bolt that holds them on there can be crazy tight. That was not bad at all. That's actually kind of nice, maybe because it's a newer mower deck. Now you do have to be careful, especially if your blades are tight or if this hardware is really tight. So you're using this block of wood to kind of trap the blade. You just want to make sure that you're ready. So if that were to let go for some reason and this wrench were to release, you wouldn't go flying. Just kind of keep that in mind that if something moves, it could be an issue. Now I always put my hardware back in just so I can keep track of it, because if I don't, when I go to put everything back together, there's a pretty good chance I will have lost something. So just something I've learned over the years. Before taking the blades off, I decided to put a little white dot on each blade. That way I can quickly reference that white dot when I'm putting the blades back on to make sure that I don't put them on upside down. Now, it actually wasn't necessary. I've taken this center blade off, and if I put it on upside down, it doesn't sit flush. I mean, it's wobbly, and it's immediately you're going to know something's not right if you put it on upside down. If you put it on correctly, it sits nice and flat. And the reason it does that is because this is actually a concave surface right here. So if I put this on that hub upside down, it won't sit flush, and you would know immediately that something was wrong. I have had mowers in the past where it was difficult to tell which way was right side up, with the blade, especially if you're doing this with the mower deck still on the tractor and you're underneath and you're holding it up there and you're trying to figure out, is it right, is it not, which way is this thing going to go? It can be a real hassle. So I like that. I'm going to use this plastic scraper to get this stuff off of here. I prefer not to use a metal scraper because I don't want to take the paint off the underside of this deck. That would expose it to rust potentially. Certainly don't want that. And fortunately, this stuff's not really stuck on there that bad either, so this is coming off pretty easy. That actually turned out better than I thought it would. It cleaned up really nice without a lot of effort, so I'm happy with how that looks. It's looking a little bit better. Definitely sharper and smoother. That's what we like. Now that I've got those blades sharpened, we can go ahead and get them put back on. Doesn't matter what blade goes where. Just want to make sure that they're right side up. Again, I've got that dot, so I don't even have to think about it. I'm just going to have the hardware finger tight right now. I'll come back through with my wrench and block of wood to get everything tightened up here in just a minute. But something else I wanted to mention, when you're putting the blades on, you want to make sure the hardware is oriented correctly. And what I mean by that is the washers that hold the blades down are actually convex. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So the washers are actually not flat. They're raised in the center. So the bolt goes through like this. And what happens is, as you tighten that bolt, it'll actually push down and flatten that washer a little bit. That's the way you want it. You don't want it the opposite. If it's like that, the washer is shaped like that, which is incorrect as I have it on there. So again, you want it oriented like that, so it's cupped, so that washer is going to be sitting like that. So only the outside edges will hit the blade, and when you tighten it, it'll moosh down a little bit. When putting the blades back on, it's going to be the same process as removing. You're going to jam a block of wood somewhere on the deck where it's going to trap that blade and allow you to torque that bolt down. Now, there probably is a torque value for this hardware, and you could get on here with a torque wrench and set it to whatever that value is. I generally don't do that. I get it pretty darn tight. Right about there feels right for me. Again, the torque wrench is probably a better option. I know what it should feel like. I'm happy with that. The one thing you want to make sure you don't do is over tighten it. So if you feel inclined to just get on there like a gorilla and tighten it with all your might, I would recommend against that, and you're probably the person that should be using a torque wrench, because nothing is more frustrating than trying to get the hardware loose to remove blades, and you're just fighting with it because it is crazy, crazy tight. And again, I've got good access. This mower deck's laying on my garage floor. It's upside down. I can get at it. Can you imagine laying in your driveway or in your yard and you're under there with a wrench trying to break the hardware loose, and it's crazy, crazy tight unnecessarily? That would be frustrating. I recommend against it. I'm finally ready to put the mower deck on the tractor. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that, only because I've already got videos out there talking about installing and then also removing the mower deck on one of these tractors. If you would like to see that process in more detail and what that looks like, you can find those videos in my video list. Got the mower deck back on. I did fire it up to make sure everything worked the way it's supposed to, and it does. Another thing I wanted to mention real quick, was the tire chains. I took off the snowblower, but I've decided to leave the tire chains on, at least for now. And the reason for that is I've got a big cherry tree in the woods that had fallen over, and I'm going to cut it up this year into firewood. And when I do that, I'm going to take the tractor back with the trailer to pull that firewood out of the woods. That extra traction that the tire chains provide is really going to help when I get into mud or I'm climbing a hill or whatever it is. So for now, those are going to stay on. And I will say that I've actually left the tire chains on for a couple of years straight. It had no negative impact on my lawn. You couldn't tell they were there. So for now, those are going to stay. One of the most common items when it comes to maintenance on these tractors is going to be changing the oil and the oil filter. You can do it in the spring, you can do it in the fall. Heck, you can do it in June if you want. It doesn't matter when you do it. It's just important that you do it. Now, I did mine in the fall, and I did that because I had a little bit of extra time. And I knew once springtime hit, I was going to have about a million other things that I was going to want to do. So I got it done. That's out of the way. Now I can concentrate on getting the yard cleaned up and get some other stuff done. I always make sure that I remove the air cleaner cover and inspect the air filter. Even if you know the air filter's new, maybe you put it in, at the end of last season, so the air filter should be in good condition, you're still going to want to get in here and make sure that there's no debris, or maybe that a little mouse or something got in here over the long winter and built a little house in here. You don't want that to happen. I am looking at this and I'm seeing some dust on the outside of the air filter, and this pre-filter, this little sponge thing, actually has some dust on it. So I'm going to take that out, hit it with my air hose, and put that back on. Other than that, though, this area is good to go. It's always a good idea to check your battery, make sure the terminals and the hardware is tight, which on this one it is. And I'm also looking to make sure there's no corrosion or other issues or signs of a problem. This looks good. We should be set there. One other item I'd heard a couple different people mention was that they would drain out the old fuel from last season and discard that and then put fresh fuel into the tank. I've never actually done that. I mean, I've had my tractor sit for 6 months waiting for spring, and with the old fuel in there, it's ran just fine. Now, I may take some fresh fuel and top off the tank. Maybe that's why I never had an issue, but I've never drained out and gotten rid of my old fuel. With that being said, if that's a concern for you and that's something you worry about, which again, it could be valid. I know people have actually had problems. I'm not discounting that. But anyway, if that's something that concerns you, you can get something like this. This is called Stabil. It's a type of a fuel additive that you put in your gas tank and even in your gas cans. And this will keep your fuel healthy. And that way, if it's sitting for several months before you get a chance to use it, it should still be good when you're ready to start using it again. I've never used the stuff. I bought this. Haven't broke the seal on it yet. I've had it for a few years. Maybe one day I'll try it. I just haven't so far. Another item you're definitely going to want to take a look at are going to be your tires. So you do want to do a condition inspection, and you're going to want to look at the entire tire and make sure there's no cracks, no damage or anything like that. If they dry rot, they get these tiny little cracks in them. That's not a good sign. Give those a look. Make sure you're in good shape there. And then you're also going to want to double check your tire pressures. So if this thing's been sitting for 3, 4, 5, 6 months maybe, some of the air might have leaked out of one or more tires. And if that happens, say the left side of the tractor, the tires are where they're supposed to be, but the right side, they've lost some air pressure. Well, now all of a sudden the right side's going to sit lower than the left side. And that's going to impact on the flatness of your cut when you go to mow the grass. And that's not something you want. It looks funny. I've actually seen it. Had that happen to me before. Thought the deck was out of level. Turned out I just needed air in my rear tire. But anyway, figure out what the air pressure is supposed to be. Make sure that's what you got. Should have a nice flat cut if you do that. Depending on the make and model of your tractor, you may have fluids in other areas. For me, on this X590, I've got a small fluid reservoir on the back of the machine, and that's for the hydraulic fluid. And that serves as both a hydraulic fluid for the power steering and the power lift deck, but it also serves as a transmission fluid for the rear of the tractor. I've double checked that, and it is exactly at the full mark, so I know I'm good there. When I'm doing my oil change, that's generally when I will hit all of the grease fittings on the tractor. So I did my oil change last fall. I already hit the grease fittings. I don't need to do that again, but I did want to talk about it a little bit. You're going to want to make sure you hit all of those Zerk fittings with grease at least once a year. And there's a few reasons that that's important. The most obvious one is the grease is a lubricant and it keeps those parts that are rubbing together from wearing out prematurely. So they need that lubricant. But another reason is that it's a barrier from contaminants getting into whatever those parts are. So, you don't want moisture getting in there, you don't want dust or debris or anything like that getting in where those parts are rubbing together, because that would also cause premature wear. So having that grease in there to protect against that stuff is really important. It doesn't take long at all to do. I can do this tractor inside of 5 minutes. I can do it quicker, except there's a couple under here that are fairly difficult to get at. It's not horrible, but it takes a little bit longer. And then after I'm done, I like to wipe those grease fittings off. I just don't like blobs of grease on there again, because that's where crap seems to collect. But I've got a few up here on the mower deck. There's a few on the axle. So literally 5 minutes, and it's a great way to protect my investment. One other thing that I do as far as my maintenance process is I wash the tractor at least a few times a year, just depending on how dirty and nasty it gets. But I like to wash it. One, because it was a pretty big investment. I mean, the thing was not cheap to buy, so I don't appreciate it when it's all covered in dust and grass clippings and things like that. So I do want to keep it clean. I like the way it looks when it's nice and shiny and clean. I'm kind of proud of that. So that's another reason that I'll wash it. But it also gives me the opportunity to do an inspection. So, if you're washing it and hitting it with a cloth or whatever that is, it's kind of forcing you to do a closer inspection, and you're seeing things that you might not see otherwise just walking past it. Another thing that I do is I'll actually put a coat of wax on the tractor at least a couple times a year. Now that's not really for appearance purposes. The main reason I do that is when I'm out mowing and I get into some dirt or whatever and it kicks up all that dust, or the wind blows just right and it kicks all that grass back onto the tractor, and now you've got all that stuff all over it, I can simply take my air hose and just blow it off, and because that wax is nice and slippery, all that crap just flies right off. So it's a lot easier to keep the thing clean, which I very much appreciate. Another maintenance option you have that I personally don't do, but I don't think it's a bad idea, is to maintain a maintenance log. And that could be as simple as a little notebook where you write in, when you've changed the oil, or maybe when you changed the plugs, or like today I blew out and cleaned the air filter. I could have logged that. Number of hours at the beginning of the season, end of the season, so I could kind of track usage, things like that. I believe there's some value to having that information. For me, I've just never taken the time to do it, to be quite honest. And I'm really anal when it comes to this stuff anyway, so I know that I'm going to be changing my oil every fall. I know that a couple times a year I'm going to be checking the fluids, and not really a fly by the seat of the pants kind of person. But if I was, and if those tasks were a little bit scattered around, then I think it might be a good idea to have that log just to make sure I didn't miss anything. All the maintenance on the tractor is done. I am now ready for spring. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel very much like spring today. It's been raining. It's really cold outside. My yard is an absolute mud pit. Typical this time of the year, though. I mean, we had all that snow melt, and we're getting a bunch of rain. April showers bring May flowers, right? Well, we're nearly to April 1st, so it's to be expected. I'm not complaining, just pointing out the facts. I just need it to dry up a little bit so I can get outside and get some things done. Until that happens, I've got plenty of other projects I'm going to be working on in the barn, and maybe I'll share some of those with you as I work through them. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned a thing or two. If you like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Again, thank you for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it. Be safe. Enjoy the rest of your day.